Welcome to the 2020 Film Independent Forum. I am Maria Raquel Bossi, Senior Director of Education and International Initiatives at Film Independent. I would like to take a moment to give a very special thanks to our wonderful sponsors for this program, including premier sponsor SAG Indy, university partner Loyola Marymount University School of Film and Television, and supporting sponsor Mississippi Film Office. We are honored to have a special documentary keynote by award-winning documentary filmmaker Don Porter, who has a vast body of work examining and shedding light on issues dealing with criminal justice, women's rights, and social equality. Her latest film is a very beautiful, poignant, and timely portrait of the congressman and civil rights hero, John Lewis, who was just laid to rest this week in Atlanta. This is a bittersweet moment since the film celebrating his legacy was just released earlier this month in the midst of a rising and undeniable movement for racial justice. So it is very fitting that before we invite Don to the screen, we take a look at John Lewis, Good Trouble.
My philosophy is very simple. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, say something, do something, get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble.
He was always different than every member of Congress. Everybody knew what he had done. He was John Lewis.
We're marching today to dramatize to the world that hundreds and thousands of Negro citizens denied the right to vote.
Congressman Lewis gave us the blueprint to organize and to legislate.
The reason why he's effective as a leader is because he's lived it.
We made a decision to march in an orderly, peaceful, nonviolent fashion from Selma to Montgomery.
You are ordered to disperse. This march will not continue.
I was hit in the head. My knees went from under me. I thought I was going to down the bridge.
If John Lewis, as a 19, 20-year-old, wasn't doing what he did, I would not be here.
We will march with the spirit of love and with the spirit of dignity that we have shown here today.
The whole time he was in the movement, it was frightening, knowing the danger, knowing what could happen.
You cannot replace a John Lewis.
He's the most courageous person I ever met.
Too many people struggled and died to make it possible for every American to exercise their right to vote.
He challenges the conscience of the Congress.
Bring common sense gun control legislation to the House floor.
40 years later, John Lewis continues to inspire us.
Are you with me? Let me hear you. 3 civil rights workers that were murdered for trying to help people get registered to vote are looking down on us.
This is a time for action. That's what I learned from John Lewis.
There are forces in America today want to take us back, but we're not going back. We're going forward.
Thank you so much for making this film. It's very touching to see it, especially now, and I'm sure you must be having very different emotions at this moment. So thank you for making the film, and thank you for coming to the forum, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you, Film Independent, for having me virtually. And I'm very much hoping that we can all see each other again in person soon. I've been thinking a lot about what I wanted to share with our community, and I very much do miss our community. I miss us being together in person, and I've been thinking a lot about that. So I thought I would discuss a few things that are percolating, and some conversations that are happening in smaller groups that I hope will kind of be brought to the fore. So I thought I would start with that, which made me think about how I began my career as a filmmaker. when the first film I made, Gideon's Army, I was working at A&E Television, and I was not on the programming side. I was not on the production side. But I thought that I had something to say, and I thought that I wanted to express myself differently. And so I kind of set out on this quest to make my first film. And being a person who was over 40 at the time that I made my first film, I had some advantages and some disadvantages. And I think the advantages were that I had a career. I knew how to take a project from start to finish. I knew the importance of networking. I knew how to work in a group. I knew how to lead teams. What I didn't know was how to make a movie. So, I guess never let that discourage you. But when I think about that time, it was possible to make a first-class movie by networking, by aligning myself with really strong partners, like Julie Goldman, who became the film's producer and really guided every step of the way. But one of the things that is significant, so Gideon's Army, I started exactly 10 years ago. It was around 2010 that we began filming, 2010 in the summer, because I traveled down to Alabama where the public defenders were meeting. So this is my 10th anniversary of becoming, a filmmaker. And at the time, the first budgets for that film was, the first budget I think I did was like $350,000, which was not enough really to make a film and work on it for 3 years. But it was enough that people weren't shocked by how low it was. It didn't seem unrealistic or impossible. The budget did go up substantially after Julie came on and pointed out all the things that we would need to do, but also because we got a partner. But I have noticed in recent years in particular, we are thought to be living in the golden age of documentary. That's a phrase that we hear a lot. And that is certainly true for some people, but it is not true for far too many people. And just as we see in so many other areas of life, there is something of concern, which I think is a growing divide between filmmakers who have resources and filmmakers who do not. And so as one thing that we're seeing is documentaries are now becoming commercially viable. It used to be the case that you made your budget in order to get a great TV or then more recently streaming license, but you weren't looking for any, kind of upside. And now that has definitely changed. I mean, the numbers, for the few that make it are substantial. So you have, in the 2018 year, you had 3 Identical Strangers with 12 million box office, RBG with 14 million, Won't You Be My Neighbor with 22 million, and then Free Solo with a staggering, north of $26 million in take. And so with those numbers, that certainly is not, not every film, but it is more than one. And it is certainly something that seems to be a continuing trend. The audiences are there, and where the audiences are, the potential for this financial upside is there. The broadcasters are coming. And so as a result of that, the budgets are increasing, which I think we'd all think can be really good news. The thing that I worry about is the budgets are increasing for a few films and the wealth is not being spread around all films. And I think that makes me wonder about the real health of our community. If we continue to point to a few shining stars, that does not speak necessarily to a healthy, full, full community. And so I just wanted to raise that and to challenge all of us to be thinking about that. So, and there's different perspectives. You can, if you are making a well-resourced film, I think evaluating how it can help the health of our community is a necessary task. So by that I mean, can you bring on more people to make sure that they have exposure to working on a fully funded film? Can you assure that you have, that the film employs and also is distributed in a way that reflects the values of the movie? But there's something else that I think that we should be thoughtful about, and I certainly am speaking to myself as much as to any of you here on this lovely afternoon, and that's, what are the topics that we are drawn to? With this attention and the increased budgets and the increased opportunities for documentary, films are becoming more market driven versus films that we are drawn to for their message. And historically, documentary, of course, is all about the message. It certainly also can be about artistic expression. Those things are not mutually exclusive. But I do worry that, we also look to films with a message, and we don't just look to films only as, kind of entertaining. The films that were, there's this interesting kind of dichotomy. The films that were recognized for, message last year, there's so many of them. There's For Sama, Honeyland, a number of, kind of really thoughtful, beautifully made, provocative films, but not necessarily kind of big box office. And so, I wonder at what message there is for our community. What does this mean for the state of documentary? And I invite you into that conversation with me. So that is one thing. Another thing I wanted to engage everyone in is this conversation around diversity and around authorship. Many of you will be familiar with the discussion around the documentary about Tiger Woods, and led by Gideon, a very necessary question of authorship. And I think that is an incredibly important conversation to be having. But I think it shouldn't just be an opportunity for talk. I think that the questions around who is a legitimate author for a particular subject is something that we should be very thoughtful about. There are such a range of opinions. There's the opinion that you should be from the same ethnic or gender group in order to make a film. And then there are people who say that absolutely doesn't matter. One of the most thoughtful opinions that I read remarked that documentary making, like so much else in this country and around the world, people are not coming from an equal playing field. There's not an equal opportunity for mentoring, for interaction, for even to be an intern. You have to be of a certain wealth in order to take a really low paying job and get the skills in order and the experience in order to be, given, the ability to direct, or the ability even to produce, the kind of like big films that we're seeing. And so I've been thinking about what diversity means for me. And one of the things that I think that the COVID experience can give us is this opportunity to think about how we are working, and whether that's the way, whether we're on the right trajectory, and whether we want to continue working the way that we were before, or if we want to take this time to look back and to say, to kind of evaluate how we've been working. And I very much have been trying to do that. I mean, I've noticed in the past 3 years, I just keep adding work, but I'm not necessarily subtracting work. And given that there are, all the other necessities and joys of your life are not evaporating, it means that work in our field has taken on an incredibly frenetic feel. And that's, I think, a concern, because, the thing that sets our work apart is being thoughtful and considered. And if you're scattered, that's the opposite of thoughtful and considered. It's also the opposite, to me, it seems, of creativity. And so if we, for the health, I think that's like the underlying, kind of concern or question that I'm thinking about, is what is actually good, not only for the health of our documentary community, but for our own personal, mental, and emotional health, because sustainability, in addition, of course, to being about finances, is also about our ability to mentally sustain the topics, the emotional tax of this work. And that emotional tax, I think, is something that we have the opportunity now to think about. So I wanted to also suggest that as we have this time, and we are, being stuck at home, for this community is, what I have seen on the positive side is a tremendous amount of creativity, of information sharing, people explaining how they've managed to film remotely, or they've good practices for making a safe filming environment. We will leave the COVID experience at some point, and we will be able to film again in a safe way. And there will be a lot of pent-up demand for nonfiction content, because what we do is really, there's a great appetite and a great audience for it. And so I wonder if we can think of not, one thing that I'm trying to do is not just think about this moment and how to get through each day in this moment, but trying to think beyond this moment and what kind of community do we want to come back to. For me, I'd like to come to a community that pays a living wage to all members, to all of its members, that gives opportunity to a diverse group of people, diverse by race, gender, economic background, sexual orientation, but also has a diversity of topics, that has a diversity of approaches. And all of those things, I think, require us to, or invite us to step back, evaluate everything that's on our plates, and ask yourself the following questions. Are you the person to tell a particular story? For me, I don't feel like you have to be the same gender or race as your subject, but I do feel that if you ignore those differences, you do a disservice to your subject. And so how you can manage to tell that story in the fullest way, do you need to invite somebody who has more familiarity with the community? And that could be, that also could be asking yourself, if you are a person of means, are you the best person to tell a story about poverty? I think that that's a really important, lest we fall into the trap of poverty porn, which I think documentary is at risk of at times. How can we assure that we're observing and telling the most honest story that we can without objectifying our subjects or our subject matter? So as I'm thinking about what kind of work I want to do next and how I want to develop my career, I'm thinking about a few things. Because I anticipate that there will be a great demand for the content that we have, this is a great opportunity for us to use our platforms wisely, to have something to say, not just to be sensational or entertaining, but to really think more deeply about our subjects and to push ourselves. I also think it's the opportunity to bring in some new voices and to step back and maybe give some opportunity to those voices. So if you feel that if you were approached with an opportunity, but you are not the person who's best able to tell that story or lead that team, reaching out beyond your usual group in order to invite others in. I think that there are so many of us who have a lot of opportunities, and this is definitely the time to think about sharing. And then I think we really need to do more than say we're going to think about this. I think we need to actually pledge to have inclusive teams, inclusive storytelling teams, and not just hire one associate producer who doesn't have a lot of authority on a shoot, but really look at who your editorial teams are, and whether they are diverse in terms of race, gender, economic background, maybe even place, maybe even place of the country. So those are some of the things that I am thinking about. And I really hope that we will have the opportunity to have this as a conversation. I don't know that there are any perfect answers to all of this. I do know that there's a lot of opportunity. There's plenty of work, and that I hope that we will be able to share it and come out of this period more thoughtful, stronger, and healthier, rather than divided and weaker.
And with that, thank you so much, Don. It's been so great hearing from you, and thank you for getting to one more meeting on a screen. It's very valuable, and we so appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all your work, Maria. Really appreciate it. Yes. And I will log in until October. Very exciting.
Bye.
Okay, take care.